Ladies and gentlemen, there may be some difficulties. For one, I can hear my own voice in my ear, which is why I'm pausing, so I can listen to myself, talk to myself. This is a discussion that Sameoldji and I wanted to have for a week or so now, based on a discussion that was launched in another group, more private group, about role-playing techniques. And the question was, what does show, don't tell mean to you? So that turned up a lot of interesting responses, and Jean-Francois posted his own video, Snow Don't Tail, which I thought was funny,
Yeah.
and Wandering Around in a Blizzard, where he posted a pretty good follow-on to those ideas. So because we're having some streaming issues, I'm going to turn my camera off, and but I'll still be here. I'm still listening. I'm still with you.
Yeah, I know that.
So let's go back a step and talk about looking at show and looking at tell as things which are multi-layered, not just opposite sides of a coin.
Mm-hmm.
You go first.
All right. Actually, for me, it's a really it's kind of like a complicated topic for many reasons. And you know, I was kind of surprised that my video was a little bit clunky in my explanation and my expression of the ideas that are for me related to the topic. But many people related to it, and many people send me messages and comment on either on Facebook or in all kinds of discussion. And they understood what I was trying to explain or express. And for me, it's still complicated. You've mentioned in one of your videos that a lot of people, when they discuss show don't tell, that principle, that idea of how to formulate or express or verbalize, narration and description in RPG and roleplay. Most people stick to descriptions, and they talk about different technique on how to describe and how to set up stuff, and utilizing language and utilizing words and description. And I agree with you that it's just one aspect of it, and it can become a little bit tricky, when you try to share with your fellow gamer another way or a different approach to, let's call it storytelling. Just the way you portray things, either narratively or either on descriptions, and even then in the first person dialogue, which is another type of way to utilize language in the hobby. So for me, I think it's important to kind of like make these distinctions, because they are subtle. Like it's one thing to talk in character, and participate to the storytelling experience, in character through the voice of the character. So it's one thing, that's dialogue, that's just talking in the character. And then you have like descriptions coming from player and coming from GM, which is basically the same thing, just not coming from the same direction, in my book at least. And then you have narration, where it's more of a, almost like, sometimes it's a third person perspective of the character and the scene. And then when especially when you, for example, you are in character and you describe how he feels and how he go about the scenery, so the character is not necessarily talking, but he's doing stuff. And so narration is another way to utilize language in the hobby as well. And then you brought up, I think it's in the second video you did, the whole other layer where symbolism comes into play. And then I was like, okay, so now I feel like I wanna you know, add to the topic, because it's becoming really interesting, and there's a lot of, you know, different kind of layers of problems that come from you know, this principle whenever it's not done well, or whenever it's not done at all, or whenever it's done.
Mm.
You know, because in a group of 5, for example, GM included, you can have like maybe half of this group that does it, understands it, and have the experience of the show don't tell, and the other half that is not even aware of that way of, you know, having this experience.
Right. So that distinction.
Yeah, so it becomes really it's become really intricate and slippery somehow
I think part of what makes it slippery is that, like, at the beginning of your description, we were fumbling for a word. So you said, hey, let's call this storytelling.
Yeah. At the beginning, it was already difficult for me to just establish some words to discuss, right?
And, you know, I've got a built-in reaction to that word, storytelling. And I feel like it doesn't belong in role-playing.
Hmm. Do you want to use another word? You just like the way language.
I guess what I would rather talk about, I think, because we talked about this before, is the idea that some of us come to a role-playing game maybe most of us come to a role-playing game to make a decision, like to experience a sequence of points of decision, and this could be handled in a variety of different ways. You know, in character, out of character, first person, third person, first and third person. It could be totally collaborative, like we pass the character to the left, right? So I'm Joe in this sequence, and then after the next roll I'm going to be Bill, and, you know, pass the characters around. Or every time we play the game, we take on a new character, and we can play them in a variety of different ways, and none of these have to be working toward a story that we are telling or someone is telling.
Mm-hmm.
It could be purely about the decisions.
Yeah.
But then again, the house next door, there could be somebody running a game, like they could have purchased a module, and the group is making decisions, but they are actually moving through a linear or semi-linear or non-linear story.
Narrative, yeah.
Yeah. And so I find when we get into storytelling implies a storyteller or storytellers, and there's an undue burden that pushes us toward books or movies or fiction of coherent units of story,
mm-hmm.
where that doesn't actually need to happen or matter in a role-playing game session.
That already is a huge distinction to start the right? It's just like boom, because there is some role-playing games out there that actually are really, really radical, you know, toward that distinction. Just in the proposition, just at the beginning of the book, you know, so some games are really just like you described, where it's about decision, and, you know, there's rotative character roles, and the players are not, you know, having the same role every time and stuff. So definitely, you know, I do agree.
So I guess I would be more comfortable with calling it role-playing. That's not going to be any more clear to people who join in on the discussion.
But it's going to be inclusive for these two that you described, though.
I hope so.
You're right. You're right, because obviously there is some role-playing experience that are not about, you know, building a narrative together as a group. You know, some role-playing experience are not about that. Obviously, I don't think they are the most common, though. I think the majority of the hobby is about, you know, telling a story and building a narrative as a group. I think, but it's kind of.
Or is it about sitting down and playing a character? I can't wait to get there and play my character. I built my character. Let's play. How many people are saying, I can't wait to participate in the creation of a story?
You're right. You're totally right. I'm curious.
I mean, we're just talking about semantics, really. I'm sure, but
I know, but I like this kind of this kind of detailed discussion. I mean, this kind of nuance, because it's true. It's true what you just said. Sometimes I'm just curious. Maybe the amount of people who see it the way you just described. In my impression, my first knee-jerk impression, I would have said that people are there to tell a story together. But I'm actually, I've played with people. I can, the more I think about it, I've played with people who are, the power gamers who create these super, optimal characters, and they just want to play it. They just want to test it against the rules, against the mechanics and the dice and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's
for other motivations, but
yeah, it's true.
I mean, that was the lure for me. And when I first heard role-playing games described, that was what was said, is that instead of reading about a character, you'll get to be the character.
Yeah, and that means making decisions that have some kind of an agency, a priori, and that is exciting because you can be creative, and you have a feeling that the game is open. It's not like a board game; it's just an open-ended experience where everything can happen.
And that brings us to show don't tell, because okay, so I'm sitting there at your table and I'm there. My job is to represent the character or characters. And well, how do I do that?
So let me ask you a question now, just to make a quick synthesis from the two videos you made, and all the different video responses and comments and discussion that came out of those. So for you, how would you quickly explain the distinction between showing, maybe with a few examples, and telling with a few examples in a average RPG experience?
I think the simplest way for me to think about it, whether in a position of narrative authority like the game master, right, or as someone who's talking in the moment, which is a kind of narrative authority, let's be honest, right? Showing is, well, it's implied, and telling is explicit. So I'm laying out the fact of the matter when I tell you. Like, you could have someone like in Shadowrun say, I am playing a rigger. So now we know the character build. They're a rigger of some kind, rather than someone coming in and saying, a figure comes in the door of Club Penumbra, and they're known in the vehicle and hot car circuit. So this person could be just a driver. This person could be a rigger. This person could just be a car thief. This person could be Mr. Johnson. This person, like there's ambiguity. It's not a good example, but the idea is we were shown a detail. Now this is role playing, so we have to speak. So everything I say is told, and that causes confusion when we try and talk about it, because I'm telling you everything. But am I?
Yeah, and so just for the record, I have the same definition. I make the same distinction as you, so we are on the same page for that distinction. And for me, what I felt like I wanted to discuss the most about that is the issues, because for me it's really interesting. I realized that discussing this topic and playing recently, it's that for some reason telling the explicit aspect of the conversation in a role-playing experience, for some reason sometimes telling takes away agency. And it struck me, it's recent for me that I realized that, is that I managed from that discussion, I managed to pinpoint an aspect of role playing, of the role playing experience in the conversation, the way the conversation tells stuff, either from a fellow player or from a GM or whatever.
Right.
When there's too much telling, I feel like I have somehow an obligation to go like not follow a path or follow a breadcrumb or red herring or whatever, but just sometimes I feel like it's like a moral situation where as a gamer, as a fellow player, like, okay, so that has been told, that has been said, and since it has been said like that, either a exposition dialogue or something like there's a man entering the room and he looks angry. Now this is pure telling, so I have to somehow take in consideration that he's angry. If I don't acknowledge the angry aspect of this NPC that comes in the room, it's almost like if I'm avoiding an aspect that either my fellow players or game master inject in the narrative.
Okay, well, let's try and break that one down like this.
Do you understand I
get it. So let's see if we can stay on tangent or off tangent or on topic. So we have a character coming through the door, and regardless of how much description of the character, we're given an emotional tag that it's obvious to everyone in the room, no special role required, that this person is angry. They're not hiding it, they're broadcasting. Everyone can see that they're angry. Okay, so someone has come through the door and they're angry. I should acknowledge this, I suppose. If this is a player character, they come through the door and they tell me, I'm obviously angry. This is a signal to roleplay. I now have to roleplay and like talk you down or deal with this is one way to react to it. And I feel this is connected to the rules of improv. If you put something into the fiction of our improvised conversation, I have to say yes to it. I have to accept it, envelop it, and then develop it, and we move on and I pass it back. Role-playing doesn't necessarily have to be all improv. In that sense, it doesn't have to follow that rule. You can reject things and say, well, wait. There are points in roleplay where this is a possibility, like, well, hang on. Remember, it was previously established that the door was locked. But whereas this could never happen in improv. You see where I'm going with that. And do I have to acknowledge the character's anger? There are people in real life who just ignore your emotions. Why not? And the second side of it I wanted to throw in there was the idea of Chekhov's gun. It feels like we're wrestling a little bit for control of the concept that if something exists in a scene, it must be used, it must matter, right? It must be there for a reason. Otherwise, get rid of it, which is a form of direction to a writer, not to burden the reader or the audience or the viewer with unnecessary information that will distract or confound them. So, man entering the room being angry, is this a red herring? Is this intentional misdirection? Or is this simply a detail? There's a man who walked in and he's angry. Or is this a desperate cry from the game master saying, please react with the world in some way that I can understand? And so it seems to me there's a lot of different ways you can react to man walks in the room angry.
I agree. I do agree. And for me, I will do a mea culpa, in the sense that it's at this point, when you consider these kind of details about the RPG experience, we obviously overanalyze, overthink. But for the sake of theory and conceptualization, let's.
Well, if we don't push it to the edge, then we don't really know what we think.
Let's do this for the game for the play. So the now for me, what I realize is that let's say I'm in the position of the game master. Like today, I had this I play feed with a fellow gamer, and so we established a cool scene. It was let me give you an example real quick. We established a cool scene. It's a family supper, family reunion. There's people are getting ready to eat at the table. Everybody's chit-chatting, and so I'm the GM, and I'm doing the NPCs and the description of the place and stuff. And the player is it's kind of like a sandbox thing because it's in the house, and you can go around and talk with the people and everything. And at one point, he goes to pour himself a drink, and at the bar, and I mentioned that in the window. There, you can see that there's a car parked in front of the house, and so it was just this thing that I mentioned, and because I just wanted to mention it, and so the character, instead of keep doing what he was doing in the scene, grab his coat, go outside to see about the car, because it was the only other thing. Yeah. That I mentioned, just it's like, hey, I just so I'm like, fuck, you didn't have to. I was not, because I haven't prepped anything about that. It's not something that I prepped. I just randomly put it there.
It could have been a glass on the table. Yeah.
And it could have been anything, and so the player just went there. So what I did is that I said, you put your coat and you open the door, and when you get outside, the car's not there anymore, because I was like, fuck, and so for me, it gets really somehow annoying sometimes, because let's say I'm in the GM chair, and in the descriptions and stuff, I something like that happens, and then everybody jumps on it, like almost like it's you have to. So I'm like, not necessarily this, and then when I'm in the player chair. And a game master brings stuff like that to me, I feel like, this is something he thought about, or this is something he prepared, and so I do the same thing as like the player. I have the same kind of thinking, like, I should do that. But me, since I am really I'm really picky about that, I usually do the opposite. So like I described it. So it's really annoying, because it's almost like I'm not buying in.
Right.
Exactly, because Ivan mentioned it. Sometimes there is a part of the expectation that you should buy in with what we gave you as fellow players somehow, and then it becomes that situation where, oh shit, do I still have agency, or I have to do that, otherwise I'm a jerk.
That's cool. Okay. I like this.
Yeah.
There is, I guess what we're rubbing up against is the ability of the listener, whoever that is, to differentiate or discern factual, I was just about to use the word description. So let's say factual exposition versus description. Or factual description versus aesthetic description, right? So we're playing a mystery, and the characters are under threat. If we were watching a movie and there's just a car outside, because it's a street and there should be a car outside, the camera kind of pans over the car, and the pre-existing background music is playing. There's no special camera movement or anything like that, and then we pan through the window and we see the character pacing back and forth. We can't do all this stuff in a role-playing game without being artificial and talking about cameras and things, but but if that car is significant, there's someone in that car watching the house, right? The camera slows down, the angle is from below, the music shifts, right? We can see the exhaust coming out of the tailpipe, and there's signs that, oh look, this is significant. The camera or the director or the writer, whoever, gives you that signpost saying, hey, feel something now.
Yeah.
In a role-playing game, off, like whether it's a dungeon crawl where every detail is either significant or insignificant to your survival, or a mystery where something could be a clue and you're not going to recognize it till later, so you just try and pay attention. Like, where are we in the mystery? Are we 10 minutes in, or are we 10 days in? It's, you know, how important is this thing? Our ability to discern.
Ah, man, it becomes really tricky because the player, if for example, I just randomly describe this thing there, and he starts putting all his intention towards it,
Yeah.
and finally I kind of have to take it away from him because there's nothing else there, or because it's not something that is interesting to me. So it's really hard, I feel, sometimes to show and to tell, because telling is important sometimes as well. Right? It's a balanced thing, I figure, for me. And so sometimes you telling stuff, or you're just describing or narrating stuff, and it's hard, I feel, in RPG, like I said in my videos, that it's hard to add stuff. It's hard to formulate stuff that will not be picked on somehow, that will not have an importance because it has been said. You know, like just random, long or random descriptions full of details that have no importance. It's really rare, I feel. Yeah, it takes a special talent to be able to do that in such a way that you don't bore the players and the fellow gamer.
Yes.
And that it not becomes heavy. It doesn't become heavy somehow.
I know some people have rules like, I won't talk for more than a minute when giving description, or yeah, I'll paraphrase the quote, box text, end quote, that kind of stuff. I just find that you can use your tone, like the sound of your voice.
Yeah.
You can use your face, and those two things can work on different levels.
Of course. Yeah.
So, you know, you can establish the description with your voice, and then, you know, use your eyebrows or whatever to imply that, oh, this is a significant detail that I'm giving you. Or you can learn to describe in circles, like the minor details to the major details, or the distant things to the close things.
This is a great technique, actually. Wow, this is dope. I've never heard it before.
So I mean, it's just like everything else, right? I mean, we expect the player to be comfortable with their character sheet, know what you can do, come prepared to actually play the game, we might say, in some games. In some games, that matters a lot less. And so come prepared to portray your character, please, or come prepared to interact with people, take action, or collaborate, or make suggestions, at least. Yeah.
Engage the narration, you know, like
or engage whatever's there to engage, right? And whatever type of game.
Interestingly enough, though, I was watching earlier tonight, getting ready to this conversation, I was watching one of Ivan's video about the topic, and Ivan is is a kind of player that doesn't really like long descriptions. He prefer vague, kind of quick, so he can let his imagination work the rest, kind of thing. It's kind of stuff that he described in his video, and he said that he prefer being told something like, there is a strange, weird, and I don't know, menacing man entering the room. He preferred to be told that he's a menace, that he's weird, that he might be dangerous. He preferred to be told straightforward, that instead of being described and implied.
Sure.
And I was like, oh my God, so that's a thing there. Because there's also the layer of taste, the matter of taste. Some gamer, some fellow player at the table might want to be told, not having to feel and imply, you know, it in their experience. And it's two different kind of strategy there, two different kind of experience, two different kind of taste.
And we can even get into that discussion with the whole idea of lines and veils, right? I mean, there are things I don't want, and there are things that I do want. You know, so I don't want to have to guess who my enemies are. I don't want to feel betrayal. So, you know, let's have all the enemies be clear. That could be a situation right there where you'd end up doing the same thing. So then you have to be told rather than shown the menace, the implied menace, where you have to really ham it up so that nobody can miss it.
Yeah, sometimes it's crucial, you know, in certain situation in a role-playing experience, it's crucial to do it that way. But other times it's so much better when it's implied. For me, one thing I realize more and more is that it can ruin the experience when it's too obvious. For me, the more I progress in this hobby, when things are being, you know, told to me in either really strict exposition dialogue or in a really, you know, obvious way, I kind of take away the for me the like I said earlier, the agency, and it can ruin the experience a little bit. And I try not to be it's really hard, man, but I try not to be too much of a jerk about it, as a don't be a dick principle.
Right.
In the sense of, you know, not to ruin the experience of everyone, trying to stay in character and trying to, you know, focus on what my character would do. But at the same time, man, it's hard.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, like to use mysteries again, you know, like you could be reading a mystery that, you know, that people are saying, wow, you won't believe the end, right? How hard it is to figure this mystery out. Or you could be reading one for, you know, a young adult reader, which is literally guiding them through the process of critical thinking. You're going to, if you're an avid mystery reader, you're going to predict the end. Your enjoyment about reading that mystery story to your child or whatever is going to be dependent on completely other things, not the mystery, where they are going to be completely engaged in the mystery.
And you see, and this is one of the reasons why I've mentioned as well in a recent video that I'd like to play in a module, because I never played a module before. And sometimes in my next experiences, when I'm going to be done with the Veil and some other games, I want to get into an experience like that, because this experience, I feel, will allow me to just disconnect, because it is written. It's a module. It's the whole idea, and I feel like,
I guess I'd be surprised if you felt much different than how you normally do it, other than you won't be contributing setting details.
Actually, the thing is that for me, it's like a sabotage, because I feel like the module is already telling everything. So when you play it, what you get is it's the reason why you are in it, and it's like a challenge to go around the obstacles that is already prepared in the module experience, instead of going in a free-form RPG experience where, you know, in which I get involved all the time, where that sensitivity to the show don't tell becomes dominant for me, because it's all about the way we utilize language. But in a module, it's prepared in advance. The telling and the showing is prepped in advance. So for me, it's almost like a liberation. I feel like it's okay, so I can just, I don't know, and I never did it, but I think that it could do that for me.
I'll be very curious to hear your response. One thing I wanted to mention, I've been trying to figure out a way to slip in, is like similar to what Ivan was saying about there are some things I want to be told and some things I'm happy to be shown, like this in hand in hand with the wonder topic.
Yeah.
I don't want you to fill in all the blanks of my imagination. So like he's clearly outlining a limit, and I think we all have these limits, but maybe we're not totally aware of them, or we haven't put it together that the reason why I like Bill's game instead of Ted's game is what they describe or how much they describe it, you know? So I think that in my case, I have a strong preference or a strong bias to not be shown a picture of the thing. I've mentioned this before, that someone says, it looks exactly like this, except for, you know, this detail is different, and this detail is like, you know, it's like,
or the example of, have you seen this movie? It's exactly like it.
Right. So for me, who wants to have as much of an in-character experience as I can. Now you're asking me to separate. You're forcing me into an out-of-character discussion that I don't want to have about stuff that doesn't need to happen, to use a technique that isn't really a technique. It's avoiding technique. It's like, here, look at this picture. Okay, now imagine it with this extra detail, or remember this movie, except it's not a horror movie now. It's a love story. Okay. There's been another way we could have talked about this.
I totally feel you. I used to, when I first started to utilize the Facebook groups for an organizing game online, I used to post more pictures and stuff. And since you've mentioned that, it struck me like, oh my God, it's true. It's true that some people might prefer, like no pictures. And since then, I never indulge in that anymore. And I do agree that imagination is it's the best tool, right? And we want to keep using it for it to get better. So let's not feeding it with Google images and stuff, right?
I mean,
now
in the Mithras game that I'm running, which is set in 1908, some of the players had legitimate concerns, like, I don't know anything about that period. I don't know what anything looked like, so I don't know what to imagine. I don't want to be imagining the modern day. And since we're preparing for that game, I used a lot of imagery and posting up pictures of steamships and what cars look like, and we found updated video footage from those actual years for some of the main cities of the year, like from London, Paris, and New York. We know what those things actually looked like in 1906 to 1910, and so I felt that's a useful bit of imagery. I don't use pictures, but it's like in the moment when you want me to, maybe we're building up to some big thing, and then it's like, okay, just a second while I pull up this picture on my laptop.
But it's not the same thing. What you describe is just to help people have some background images so they can actually make up their own.
Right.
So do that in advance. So just feed your mind. Yeah. It's not the same thing. Yeah, of course.
But to enable your group to be able to show you things, you need to be willing to imagine, I feel. Because otherwise it's just telling. There's no mystery. There's no work on your part. It's we could imagine this, right? We could picture a dungeon crawl which has a room that's otherwise empty that has a lever in it. So this is obvious. Like, I either pull the lever and something happens, or nothing happens, or I don't pull the lever and I wonder. Right? So I'm either turning the trap on or I'm turning it off. It's probably a trap, this kind of thing. But we can do that exact same situation, and we can do it in not a dungeon crawl, right? We could open up with like, could be playing a vampire game, right? Characters are in the succubus club, and there he or she is across the room, right? You're the perfect person that you would like to feed on this evening, right? And you, the player, go, awesome, I rolled well, blah blah blah, and they move in for their feeding, and then because of that, all hell drops upon them, because that person was the chosen, loved target of some powerful person who is now your enemy because you had no idea, right? We've seen this play out in movies hundreds of times, like you slept with the wrong person, or you opened the door for the wrong person, or you helped the wrong person, and now you've got this powerful enemy that you didn't even know existed yesterday. It's exactly the same as walking into that dungeon blind and pulling this lever because, well, why not? It's there, and right. So that's the exact same situation.
But that's right, and it brings me back the idea of the people who think they are being cheated sometimes. When you let's say, for example, you describe something in such a way, and they actually, that the way you describe or you portray the scene, it influences their decision making, and they make a decision and they get kind of like backstabbed. screwed, and now they think it's bad GMing, or it's bad form, or
I wouldn't have done that if I'd known.
Yeah, exactly, stuff like that. Or for example, you know, they roll well, they manage to feed off that person, but then there's bad consequences. So they're like, "Fuck, I roll well. I'm not supposed, you know, to
Exactly." Yeah,
so that is, but that's another topic. But at the same time, it's kind of it's part.
It's the same topic. It's showing and telling, right?
Yeah, of course, it's part of it, because that's why I said, when everything you said is important. If you start saying useless thing too much, and people get misdirected. So some people wrote me in the comment section, like, they like to be misdirected because it's cool. Yeah. It's harder to manage around those. Some other people some other people they don't. So it's really, you know, it's this hobby is.
Back to talk to your players. So when I showed you the lever, did you like that, or did you want me to tell you that, okay, if you pull the lever, something bad will happen, and if you don't pull the lever, nothing will happen. So what is your decision now?
and so I had this discussion today with my fellow player in feed, and I described the session, and I said, you know, in this session, as a player, you made 3 decisions. So you add 3. You utilized your agency as a player 3 times in an hour and a half. So the rest of the whole thing was me, you know, kind of like describing and narrating stuff in such a way that you just obliged to it, and it just followed some kind of a path. But I didn't have any preparation. I was just improving, so just following my improvisation. And I described, so in that moment when I talked about the car outside, you went there. Then when I talked about that, you did that. When I talked about it, you did exactly that. But at the same time, so he understood what I was saying. And at the same time, he said, yeah, but nothing happens if nobody nothing happens if nobody take action or bring something new. And it's true. So it's this kind of weird thing where you have to add stuff, but the stuff that you add takes so much place because it's new. It's the new shiny thing in the narration. So the attention goes there super fast. And so how do you know, it takes a lot of talent to be able to.
This is where we get into the part of the discussion that I really like, the subliminal part of it.
Yeah.
How am I communicating non-verbally in this totally verbal medium?
That's what I was talking about when I was talking about expression.
Yeah. So like, it's really hard in play by post. Of course, you're forced, because it's harder for people to comprehend through text. So you do have to tell them more to give them a fighting chance of getting all the details.
Yeah.
And they're interrupted. You know, they're reading it on their phone while they're on the bus or whatever. But when you can see the person, right, you have the ability to use your hands, use your shoulders, use the set of your head, lean in, lean back, adjust your volume, adjust your tone, and
breathing.
Yeah, all of these things which we're already trained to recognize. It's not a skill we have to particularly develop in most cases.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that the face to face, or at least with a camera, a reasonable size camera, your capacity to deliver the sense of importance versus background detail improves. But you still have to choose to control what you say.
Yeah, and then you also have the use of symbolism, like you said, because symbolism is huge, but it's not everybody who understands it and is knowledgeable of symbolism, or archetypes, stuff. So
I mean, that's another example from our Mythos game. This is an email. So I wanted people to get a sense of what they could do as a player to get a better sense of what we're going for. So it's set, like I said, in 1906, 1908, that period of time. It's still very much an age of adventure and exploration. So they're on a steamship, right? A tramp steamer that makes its way around the world. And the steamship, of course, is named, and it's called the Dreams of Paititi, which is a ridiculous name. So this, we live in the modern world, and it would be completely possible to, do a Google search like Dreams of Paititi. You're not going to find anything with that name, but you will find Paititi, which is one of those many legendary cities of gold that adventurers would quest for, are still questing for today. And so, why does the ship have this name? It doesn't have to go any deeper than that. It's a an under the surface message. It's not something I'm going to keep hammering over the head, but it's there. It's in front of them. It's the detail of the world. And so, whoever named this ship had dreams of gold, dreams of adventure, finding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that kind of thing. So, well, how many of the players actually looked it up? I don't know. I haven't asked.
How many of your fellow players will actually notice that detail if they don't know?
Right, and it's not something I concern myself. So, like I was mentioning in the private video that you were talking about, is that there are levels of things. Like there's things that I'll only mention once, things that only matter in passing. If you get it, you get it, and it's a boon to you, and it's fun for me if you recognize it, but it's not essential. Guy walking through the door.
There was a great example with the Star Wars analogy you did.
But if someone walks through the door, that's important. And if you've forgotten that he walks through the door, I have to remind you, because he walked through the door. He's there. He's in your face, and something's going to happen because he walked through that door to come to you, right?
Yeah.
And
I remember when you described your what's your character's name in the Veil? Cadmus' parents, like the mother and the brother. When you described them, that's what you did. You did some a great balance of telling and showing, because it's not the telling that made me understood the big brother feelings. It was the showing. So it's a good example, and they were at the door. they were trying to enter the door, So, and today, I had the opportunity to actually go through a long scene in feed with my fellow player,
right.
and I was aware of trying not to tell. So I was aware. I was conscious. I was, I said to myself. So what I said to sabotage me and help me not expose, not tell, but narrate and describe the scene in such a way that it shows for him. So what I said to myself before then, I said, what I will try to do is create the most miserable family reunion this guy can go through. That's all I had, like as a mojo, as a rule of thumb, as a principle. So every interaction, every opportunity I had, everything I was just saying or describing was to put him in an awkward situation. That's all. So I was never saying or never telling him or exposing stuff to him in such a way that he understood he's miserable, but I was just reacting to him in such a way that it's just, it was terrible. It was disgusting. Like, it was super awkward of a scene. But I was consciously trying to produce that, and I was kind of proud at the end, because I felt like I did it. I succeed. But I also realized that if you actually take the time to be aware and conscious, just before then, it's doable on purpose. It's not just random. Sometimes you can actually, control it. It's not that hard.
It's hard. We've got some comments. I'm going to have to go in just a handful of minutes. We have quite a comment chain that we haven't been looking at.
Let's try to engage those a little bit before going, if you have time.
So we've got modules may be prepared but contain flexibility. Okay. Okay, let's hang on a second. We have can Do we feel like these things can be reasonably done over the camera? I always feel the more personal the game is, the easier subtle descriptions get. Yes and no. For me personally, one of my favorite types of roleplay is horror-based mystery gaming, and one of the reasons why I have shied away from it in the online format is I find it's exhausting to try and make sure that those subtle or subliminal messages are actually reaching my audience, and they actually have to be looking at the camera at that moment. And it was too much work and not enough fun for me, so I just stopped doing horror games online.
I just want to say something about that real quick. I talked with some of your player who played in the Ref with you.
Oh yeah.
2 or 3 sessions, Ref.
Yeah.
And they were scared and they felt bad and they were exhausted because the experience was so intense. They told me many times afterwards. So just want to let you know that it works. Maybe it was not fun for you, but it worked. It worked.
I'm glad to hear it worked for them, because I've been feeling for years like it didn't work.
Oh, actually, I don't remember who it is, but one of these guys told me that one of the reasons he kind of bail out is that because he find it too intense, too hard to support. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. So anyway, I guess what we're saying is that it can be possible. It is work. Whereas, there are things you notice out of the corner of your eye that you're not going to experience on the camera.
Of course.
You have to be paying attention to the screen.
Of course.
It's a sense when people are moving.
Yeah. And also, the camera just provide a frame, a small frame. So like for example, it's just your face in the dark.
Yep.
Some people are a little laid back, so you have the arms. But most people, that's all you have.
Right. So there's much less of you there, and the microphone affects how your voice sounds, and it compresses the tonal range of your voice.
Also, everybody needs to take turn when they speak.
Yeah. So all of that has an impact. So it's a skill to be mastered like anything else. Like, please watch the screen when we play, because I'm going to be using body language as much as I am verbal description. Make that clear part of your contract for play, and then you can accomplish a lot of stuff. But probably a shorter session will result.
Yeah, there are also the time. It takes many sessions to establish fear in such a genre, for example.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, you can watch in the Leagues of Cthulhu game that we ran, we never really reached a point of fear. We also weren't trying, but we reached the point where people were protective of their characters.
That's huge.
That's what we wanted. So we were happy with that. But anyway, I do have to go. I'm going to turn the camera back on just to say goodbye.
All right. So, thank you, Anthony, to join me for this one. It's a topic that is really interesting, and I appreciate the talk.
My pleasure. And likewise, thanks for the invitation, and look forward to the next discussion that we have about semantics and the finer points of the finer points.
The smallest of the smallest. Yeah, of course. And see you soon for the Ver.
See you soon.